Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Topher Project. My name is Topher Field and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. Many of us are aware that the justice system isn't always entirely just, and many people have, at a minimum, a suspicion, but some people have first-hand knowledge that men aren't always treated the same as women. Now, of course, there are examples of injustice of all kinds against women as well, but certainly men do seem to get a bit of a raw deal. But if you dare to say that, well, then you're going to get into all sorts of trouble. Someone who is going through all sorts of trouble right now is Dr. Fiona Girkin. She joins me right now on the Topher Project. Dr. Fiona, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Look, many people won't be aware of your story. So let's just start with a very simple précis. What was that you came out and said? What were your grounds for saying it? What are your qualifications? And what was the response?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in female psychopaths, which I looked at in terms of females in the workplace, not so much domestic violence. But my job was working with police and teaching them about how to work with victims of domestic violence. I engaged with Bettina and when I contacted her because I like to have conversations with different people from different angles. I think it's really important to start those conversations. And what I was hearing from the police were that they were seeing a lot of female perpetrators and that they were seeing 50-50 female and male perpetrators when they went into the home. And so that was something I really wanted to talk about and really start that conversation. I come in my teachings from a humanistic perspective rather than a feminist perspective. So one of the things I said in my interview with Bettina was that I'm not a feminist. And that's pretty much taboo if you're teaching family violence to not be a feminist. So I try and teach around having a look at what's happening in the room, having a look at the behaviour, and not so much looking at the gender, but looking at actually what's going on. Because I think looking at just gender can bias how you think.
Sorry, you're not suggesting that the police should arrest and charge people based on the evidence and not preconceived notions, are you?
Yes, I am. You'd think that would be a good thing, wouldn't you?
Well,
how dare I?
No wonder you got in so much trouble. You can't say crazy, outrageous things like that these days. Now, you mentioned Tina Arendt. She, of course, has been a wonderful campaigner on this issue. And again, to be very clear, neither you nor I nor Tina deny the existence of domestic violence against women, and we decry that as well. But just like you said, it needs to be taken on the evidence. Now, there's been a backlash, I think is probably putting it mildly, against you simply coming out and saying, hey, police, you should probably do your job based on the evidence. Before we get to what's happening now and going forward, tell us a little bit about what the response was to your interview with Tina.
Yeah, so I was really particular with Bettina when I did the interview that I was not going to criticise the Tasmanian police, and I did not. I spoke about how great they were and all the levels of checking they had when they did arrest someone to make sure they were the right person. And I talked very positively about that. But unfortunately, the angry feminists, not all feminists, just the angry feminists in Tasmania decided that they weren't happy with what I'd said, and they made the assumption that a men's rights advocate was actually teaching domestic violence, and that's not the case. I'm not a men's rights advocate. I advocate for people that are in danger of violence.
Nor are you teaching domestic violence. You're simply calling out the fact that there's not always evidence-based when they choose who they're going to charge.
Yeah, and just that they have to look at where the red flags are coming from, who's holding the power, not so much who's got the gender. That is more likely. Mind you, I do teach that women are more likely to be victims of domestic violence because that's what the stats show. However, we're seeing a change, we're seeing a shift, and we need to be having that conversation because I don't think the stats are actually telling an honest answer as to what's happening.
And it's a very, very touchy subject. The minute you talk about it, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of angry people in the comments on this video as well. The minute you try and suggest, hey, we should be evidence-based here, then people come out of the woodwork to get very angry with you. But Tasmania is a little bit unique in the sense that Tasmanian police are able to put out what is essentially an AVO against an individual without reference to the courts in the first instance. And that's led to a bit of a statistical anomaly, I guess. It's revealed something about the behaviour of the courts. Can you dive into a little bit of the data for us?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I've gotten into trouble for with the interview is that what I was saying in terms of the police when they went into a home, they were seeing about 50-50. And I've spoken with a hell of a lot of police since I've had this job in the last 14 months. But the stats were saying 80% of men are charged for domestic violence. 80% of that is men. So something's happening along the line that's causing more men to be charged than women.
So the police are saying they're observing 50-50 when they walk into a home. The courts are then saying it's 80-20 when it actually gets to the charge sheet. Now, the skeptics would potentially suggest that might be to do with the seriousness. Perhaps what men are doing against women is that much more serious and deserves that much more of a response. Are there any caveats or understandings, contexts in which we could view that data where that 80-20 split versus the 50-50 coming from police might actually make sense?
Yeah, so if you actually look at the stats that were released by the police in recent years, it shows that the increase in violence has come at the low level. So the low level violence has pretty much doubled, but the actual high level violence, people that are in physical danger of being killed, has actually come down and come down quite significantly. And so that's the interesting thing, to just look at the numbers in isolation. You're not getting the complete picture. You need to look deeper.
So what does this mean for your work going forward? I mean, the mob really have kind of come for you. There's been an effort to cancel you. Where are you at the moment?
As it was published in the ABC, which was the first time my family and friends found out that I'd been stood aside, I was told that I'm not to teach into the policing program until an assessment was done, and they were looking at the behaviour policy of the university and whether I'd breached that. I didn't believe I had, because I thought I had academic freedom to talk. I'm since finding out that the university has different views on that. However, I've talked to people that have been part of this academic freedom argument before, and they're saying I had academic freedom to talk about the work I do as an expert in the field. So right now I'm actually on sick leave because I'm really not coping mentally very well. I've lost a job that I absolutely loved, and I'm devastated. I haven't heard back from the university since they sort of stood me down last Wednesday in terms of what's happening. I was supposed to hear today, but I'm yet to hear anything from the university, so I'm actually not sure what's happening.
One of the questions that comes through my mind, Fiona, is who do they send in to fact check you? If you're the one with a doctorate in female psychopathy, who are they going to send in to turn around and say, oh, no, actually, you're not suitable for this role anymore? You are the expert in that area, are you not?
Yeah, so I think I'm confused about that, because I've always been honest about how I teach and the angle I take, and that's always been spoken about quite highly at all levels. So this is it really jeopardizes the work that I've been doing, and it feels like there's some angry people that have complained that work in the female support service sector. Probably some of the people that I interviewed, their victims in my PhD, because I spoke to a lot of people in Tasmania about working with female psychopaths in the sector. I imagine some of them probably come under that category. They've come for me, and Tasmania is a small place, and people knew about my PhD as well. So I think there's a few people that aren't that fond of me, and I think that that's caused this uprising. But it's a shame, because
that's one of the things. Sorry, that's one of the things that education, universities, institutions of higher learning are supposed to be all about: is academic freedom, the ability to challenge the status quo, to not bow down to the mob. Unfortunately, we have seen this before in Australia. I won't name names, but there have been some high-profile instances of tenured professors being stood down in the last few years on the eastern seaboard of Australia because they've said things that were factually able to be backed up, and they were indeed the subject matter expert in the area that they were speaking into, but because it didn't match the zeitgeist of the moment, shall we say, they were academically punished for that. Where does this go from here? Is there any kind of an arbitration process available to you? What does someone in your position do?
I'm not quite sure. I guess I just need to find out the outcome of the assessment that they're doing. If they decide that I have breached a policy, then that's going to be a very different process. So at this stage, I'm kind of just sitting on my hands, other than Bettina's army going into bat for me, which I cannot thank them enough. So at this stage, I don't actually know what's next for me. I have spoken to people who have lost jobs over academic freedom, and they've said I did nothing wrong, that I actually didn't breach any kind of university policy, and I had every right to talk without permission from my university.
Well, it's my hope that myself, and I want to give a shout out to Damien Curry and to others in the alternative media that are helping to draw attention to what you're doing. And of course, to Tina Arendt, just what a wonderful woman and what a wonderful advocate she is. And I'm so glad that you've got her in your corner.
Yeah, me
Hopefully,
too.
by bringing attention to this story, we are going to help to shield you somewhat from the consequences of that. But then again, you just never know in these times and these days. But certainly for you personally, I hope that you are able to stay well. Maybe turn off the social media and tune out a little bit from time to time. And look, I look forward to checking in with you as this story progresses. Please know that we're in your corner and we're thinking
Thank
of you. And I know that amongst my audience, there's going to be an awful lot of people who aren't just in your corner, but are actively grateful to you for the stand that you've taken and for simply saying something as outrageous. Let's remind ourselves, as outrageous as the police should look at the evidence when considering who the perpetrator of a domestic violence case might be. You wild renegade, Dr. Fiona.